jibber jab, bamboozle, nuka noozle, bippity bop cheekle. You jibber jab, bamboozle, nuka noozle, bippity bop cheekle. I mean, you keep on talking, but you don't know where to turn it off.
Good evening and welcome to the weekend. I'm Jon Caldara, president of the Independence Institute. You're watching Independent Thinking. You know, you might be getting your news from shows like this. The newspaper? Nobody reads the newspaper. Everybody gets it online. To talk about the changing format of the news from the Independence Institute, one of our investigative reporters, Todd, who spent a lot of time at 850 KOA before that. And also you do your own web page outside of what we do called
CompleteColorado.com.
which has broken a few interesting stories around town.
We've had the good fortune to break some stories that some of which have been political, some have not been, but most recently we published the fact that the National Republican Senatorial Committee had in fact purchased 2 domain names for Jane Norton, and of course that led to an interesting series of events.
We'll talk about that.
Yep.
And also from Ed News, Colorado, Alan Gottlieb, you used to be with the Denver Post for many years.
I was there from 1988 to 1997.
And why'd you jump ship? Was it the drinking problem or something else?
Yeah, somebody locked my bottle in the drawer,
Yes.
and it was hard to get it out. No, I was just ready to do something, get a little more involved in policy issues instead of having to sit in the corner and take notes all the time. And so I just really felt a desire to be more involved in the actual decisions and
So in other words,
conversations.
you were reporting on stories that you thought, you know, I'd rather be more involved in those stories, and you can't do that as a reporter.
Yeah, I got tired of sitting there and listening to people talk and thinking I had better ideas than they did.
Yeah, that's my life all the time.
Sure.
Tell me a little quickly about Ed News, Colorado. What's the focus?
Ed News Colorado is really just trying to sort of fill some of the void that's been created by the demise of the Rocky Mountain News and by just the sort of diminishment of newspaper journalism. And we have 3 full-time people. All of us were professional daily newspaper journalists, another Denver Post guy, Todd, who was there for 30 plus years. And then we hired Nancy Mitchell, who was the preeminent education reporter for the Rocky Mountain News until it folded, and we hired her right as soon as they closed.
All right, and you focus on education news.
We focus on education news and policy news about education in Colorado.
All right, can we take a moment here and bow our heads in silent remembrance for the Rocky Mountain News? Just let's go here. I miss the Rocky. I miss the Rocky like nobody's business. It is difficult being in a 1 newspaper town where I grew up here with 2 newspapers. Have you seen the effect of a 1 newspaper town? I'm not saying the Post is a slacker paper, but it's different.
It is very different, and I remember my parents live in Oklahoma City, and I remember calling my dad and saying the Rocky and Paul Harvey both died within 2 or 3 days of each other, which for me was a big blow because I'm a radio guy. But as far as the Rockies' demise, there are many days I wake up and I open the Denver Post on the web, their homepage, and I'll see that their featured article is some sort of human interest story, which again, I don't knock human interest stories, and that's what the Post has always done best. But I think what the Rocky always offered was something that was more hard-edged and immediate to that day. And that's one thing that I know that I definitely miss with the Rocky Mountain News. The other thing I'd say that I miss, and when I began my reporting career in Oklahoma City, I did a lot of beat reporting on crime, where every day I went to the Oklahoma City Police Department's headquarters and I did a lot of crime reporting. And I understand how difficult it can be to do crime reporting in an appropriate context. I've never seen an outlet do crime reporting with the appropriate context as well as the Rocky Mountain News.
What have you missed from the Rocky? What has the city lost so far?
Well, I guess what I see is that, you know, when there's that competition, because I was in the middle of the newspaper war, when I was at the Post, the joint operating agreement hadn't happened yet, so it was all out war.
It was fierce.
And so you really had to be on your toes. Both papers had to be on their toes to make sure that they didn't get beat on a story. Now I don't think there's that sense anymore. And, you know, I know we're too small yet. We've broken some stories that the Post definitely hasn't had that were good stories, but they don't feel like they have to follow them because they may a week or 2 later kind of come back and act like they broke it because they don't. There's no other behemoth to fight against.
And if I can just add on to what he says about competition, I mean, next year will be our first real full election cycle where political candidates won't have had that opportunity to maybe play a little bit of poker between the 2 papers and maybe bluff one and hand a scoop to another or something like that to their advantage. So it's going to be very interesting, I think, in terms of how it's going to play out. And of course, that's a nonpartisan issue here. We're talking about Republicans and Democrats that are going to have to do battle in a 1-paper town.
It was fun having 2 papers because if you had a hot story, you could go over to this one and go, "You interested?" And they go, "Maybe." well, if you don't run it, I'm going to give it to them. Oh, I'm very interested.
right.
And now there's just not enough space in newspapers. The amount of real estate in the Denver Post, even though it's a broadsheet, there's a lot of stories. There's only 2 pages for local news. Then that's it. And if there's more local news than those 2 pages can handle, it's not there.
At the same time that the Rocky closed, the Post's news hole has been shrinking pretty perceptibly. I mean,
What do you mean news hole?
I mean the space that there is not for advertisements but for actual news content.
Right.
And there used to be a separate Denver in the West section, a separate business section, a separate sports section. Now the business section is part of Denver in the West, and on Mondays the front section, Denver in the West, and business are all folded into one. So there's just not as much room, even though there's only one paper left. That paper is smaller than it was before.
And I think to the same token, I always perceive the Denver Post as striving to be a newspaper of record like a Los Angeles Times or a Miami Herald. And so because of that, I agree with you, Alan, that when you go through the first 6 pages of the Post, it's typically all national news, and you don't start to get to the great local news until page 7 or 8 when you get to the Denver in the West section. And I think it was the exact opposite with the Rocky Mountain News.
It was the opposite. I mean, they started with local news first.
And the big local picture, probably.
Right. And then in the back was the national news.
Right.
And in this day and age, the national news, we get like this from internet, from talk radio, from cable news.
On your BlackBerry,
on your BlackBerry,
iPhone.
on your iPhone. All right, let's talk about what both of you have explored on your own in different movements, which is the idea of having local entities bringing news in a different format online. Now, both the Denver Post and the Rocky Mountain News had great websites, and now I go to the Denver Post website several times a day to see if anything's breaking. 9 News was a champion on web-based news. They've got a lot of stuff, so does Channel 4 and others. But there seems to be this growing sense of small, little, independent type organizations, some of them that have a very strong political axe, some of them like yours, which really doesn't take a political side, putting out the news. Now, the audience is pretty small for what you guys have. When the Post now has a circulation of, 400,000 people, something like that, that's a big audience. Let's talk about some of these other sites. What pops to your mind as far as the sites here in Denver that people go to take a look?
Well, I'm sure that for people on the left side of the political spectrum, they're involved with Colorado Paul's probably on a daily basis, even though it's not really what you would consider a news site.
Still more of a gossip site. Colorado Paul's.
It is, but the way they gossip or the way they editorialize, it always links back to a news story that was the genesis of the gossip or the speculation. So in that way, it is its own news aggregator in a sense. I think the Colorado Independent has been fairly successful in catering to people on the left side, but they've also been very fair. For example, I think for the Independence Institute's Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Party this last year, I think the best and most fair coverage that party received was actually from the Colorado Independent, strangely enough, as that may sound to some people. So those are
who we invited to come here today,
Right.
but they didn't want to come, which is too bad. They do some good work.
And as you mentioned when introducing me, I run a website along with my partner Justin Longo, which is called CompleteColorado.com. It's meant to look exactly like the Drudge Report, and it's meant to fashion in exactly the same sense. So what we try to do there is where one television station might have a scoop that, as Alan, you said, no one else will pick up on because of copyright laws, and the other station wants their exclusivity. What we're able to do with one page is assemble all of the proprietary reports that each of these individual outlets may have, and thereby, with coming to this one site, you have no need now to go to 20, the 20 or 40 that produce stellar journalism every day in Colorado.
But on your side, I mean, are there any more of these? Is it good to call them micro news sites? Would that be a good way to put it?
Some of them are. I mean, I think ours is because we're a niche site in that we only cover education. When the Rocky first closed, there was one site, and then now there have been a couple of others that were trying to kind of replicate a newspaper by having sections for news, sports, international news, cop news, and all of this. We've decided that we thought it was more financially viable to really have a small staff with expertise and focus on one issue area. Now, I think there's a huge playing field out there available for other people who might want to do health news, environment news, infrastructure news. I mean, there's just no shortage of other specific topics, but I think that's the way to go.